The Gospel of Luke, it's one of the most influential books ever written, right? It's shaped our art, our laws, our entire culture for 2,000 years. It's this beautiful, detailed story about the life of Jesus. But there's a secret hiding in plain sight. You see, unlike a lot of ancient letters, the author never actually signs their name. They just start. So, what we're going to do today is put on our detective hats. We're going to dive into this 2,000-year-old mystery. Who really wrote the Gospel of Luke?
Okay, so since the book itself doesn't give us a name, our first move has to be to look for clues outside the text. We've got to become historical detectives and listen to the witnesses. You know, the earliest people who read and protected this account.
And what's just remarkable is what we find when we do that. We've got these 5 key independent sources from way back when. We're talking about the oldest manuscript we have, P75, all the way to major church historians. And here's the kicker. They all point to the very same person.
Take the Muratorian Canon, for example. It's a document from the 2nd century and it's crystal clear. It says the 3rd book is according to Luke. And get this, it even tells us his job. He was a physician. Now you have to understand, in ancient history, getting this kind of unanimous agreement from different sources with 0 competing theories, that's like hitting the jackpot. It's incredibly strong evidence. So, there we have it. Our primary suspect is a man named Luke.
All right, so we've got a name, Luke. The early tradition is rock solid on this. So now let's circle back to the book itself and see if we can build a profile of this guy. What does his writing actually tell us about him?
Well, first off, he's totally upfront about the fact that he wasn't an eyewitness. Right in the introduction, he basically says, hey, I wasn't there, but I've done my homework. I've carefully interviewed the people who were. He's acting like a first-rate historian here.
Second thing we notice? This guy was brilliant. I mean, the Greek he writes in is some of the most sophisticated in the entire New Testament. His vocabulary, the way he structures his sentences, it all screams highly educated. He was almost certainly a Gentile, a non-Jew, and probably moved in some pretty influential circles.
And even though he wasn't Jewish, man, he did his homework. He has this incredible command of the Hebrew Scriptures. He's constantly weaving in references to show how Jesus' story connects back to ancient prophecies. It's obvious he spent a ton of time studying the Septuagint. That was a Greek translation of the Old Testament that everyone was using back then.
So, let's recap the profile. A highly educated Gentile, a meticulous historian with a deep knowledge of Jewish texts. Does this match anyone we know from the New Testament? Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The name Luke only pops up 3 times, and every single time he's connected to the Apostle Paul. He's called a fellow worker and, you guessed it, the beloved physician. It's a perfect match. The pieces of the puzzle just click right into place.
Okay, so we've got a really clear picture of our author now. But to really get what he's writing, we have to do something else. We have to step into his world. The way people thought back then, it was just fundamentally different from how we see things today. So let's try to put on a pair of first-century glasses and see the world like he did.
Probably the biggest thing to wrap your head around is what scholars call spirit cosmology. For Luke and his audience, the spiritual realm wasn't some far-off floaty cloud place. No way. It was right here, all around them, totally intertwined with the physical world. So when you read about angels delivering messages or demons causing sickness, that wasn't a metaphor for them. That was just reality. It was how the universe actually operated.
And inside this spiritual world, you have the setting of the story, Second Temple Judaism. And you have to realize it wasn't a monolith. It wasn't like everyone believed the exact same thing. There were some huge debates going on. For instance, you had the Pharisees who strongly believed in the resurrection of the dead. But then you had the Sadducees, the powerful temple elite, who were like, nope, no such thing.
But for all their differences, there was a kind of glue that held them together. There were 4 core beliefs that pretty much all Jewish people shared. They believed that God is one. That's the Shema. They believed in the covenant, marked by circumcision. They believed in the importance of God's law, the Torah, and they all saw the temple in Jerusalem as the absolute center of their religious world. That was their shared foundation. So, we've got our author, we've got his world, but there's still one massive piece of the puzzle missing. Who was he writing to? And maybe more importantly, why?
Well, it turns out both the Gospel of Luke and its sequel, the Book of Acts, are dedicated to one specific person, a man named Theophilus. And Luke addresses him as Most Excellent Theophilus. Now, that's not just being polite. That was a formal title used for high-ranking officials. It tells us that Theophilus was likely a man of serious social standing, another Gentile elite just like Luke.
And that just makes the mystery even more interesting, right? You have this highly educated author writing this enormous 2-volume work for another wealthy, powerful guy. So who was this Theophilus, really?
The honest answer? We don't know for sure. Scholars have a bunch of theories. Maybe he was the rich patron who paid for the whole project to be written. Maybe he was a Roman official connected to Paul's imprisonment. Some even think the name is symbolic. Theophilus means lover of God, so maybe it's a stand-in for anyone who loves God. He's one of history's great question marks.
Okay, one last clue: the timing. When was this actually written? Well, most scholars agree that the Gospel of Mark came first, probably around 70 AD. And we know Luke used Mark as one of his sources, so logically, Luke must have written his account sometime after that, most likely in the 80s AD. And that's really important, because it tells us this isn't a live report. It's a carefully composed history, looking back on events from about a generation later. So, let's put all the pieces on the table. We have a brilliant Gentile doctor writing in the 80s AD for a powerful Roman official named Theophilus. You'd think this story he tells would be all about celebrating power and influence, right? But what he actually writes is the exact opposite. And this is the central, stunning paradox of Luke's gospel. The heroes of his story, other than Jesus, aren't emperors or wealthy elites. They're the poor, they're women, they're the sick, they're tax collectors, the most despised people in society. The message is just radically inclusive. It's almost like he's trying to show his powerful friend Theophilus, look, this movement, it turns the whole world upside down. Its real power is found with the people nobody else even sees.
And that was Luke's genius. The scholar Fred Craddock puts it perfectly. Luke is the only writer in the New Testament who manages to connect 3 huge stories: the story of Judaism, the story of Jesus, and the story of the new emerging church. He's building this grand, sweeping narrative to show how a Messiah for the Jewish people became a source of hope for the whole world.
So that leaves us with one final, fascinating thought. Luke, the brilliant doctor historian, he figured out how to tell this story for a global audience. But in solving that mystery, he left us with a new one to think about. How on earth does an ancient book, written by one elite man for another, end up carrying such a powerful revolutionary message for the outcasts and the forgotten? A message that still resonates 2,000 years later.